So Olivier, can you start now? Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 7th webinar of the Zero Emission Building Academy, a partnership between Building Performance Institute Europe, European Construction Technology Platform, and the European Copper Institute. Today, I'm very glad to welcome three speakers. Sylvain Robert from CINEA joined us additionally for the beginning. And then we will have Andreas Ermerling and Roberto Lolini to speak about the Building Stock Observatory, a very important topic to know the building stock that we need to decarbonize. So first I will quickly introduce the three panelists we have. So Sylvain is working at CINEA, well known, the European Climate, Environment and Infrastructure Executive Agency. Is a policy officer managing various research and innovation projects funded by the EU programs in the field of energy efficiency and sustainable buildings, and so managing the Building Stock Observatory project as well. Then we will have Andreas from Guidehouse consulting firm, and Andreas is a leading science-based policy consultant, particularly on decarbonization of the building sector, so advising authorities and businesses on this. So welcome, Andreas. And finally, we will have Roberto mainly joining for the Q&A session at the end. Roberto is head of the research group Energy Efficient Buildings at EURAC, a private research center. And so he's leading a team of researchers on technologies and methodologies for high indoor environmental quality and low energy buildings. So a lot of good brain for energy efficient and decarbonized buildings today. We are all engineers also, I noticed. And I think we are all passionate by decarbonization of the building stock. And for this, we need to have a good data set with the Building Stock Observatory. So that's the goal today. And I will give the floor to Sylvain to introduce it first. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Quentin. So it's a big pleasure to be here in this webinar. So first of all, I'm not a policy officer. I was policy officer a few years ago in DG Energy. No, it's fine. And now I'm project advisor in CINEA. So a slightly different job, managing projects instead of doing policy making, but still with a strong policy focus. So indeed, the aim of this presentation is to give a very brief overview of the Building Stock Observatory, and we can start, next slide, with a bit of context. Next slide. So basically, just to show that, well, data is a critical enabler when it comes to EU policy monitoring and making, especially in the field of energy, of course. And this is why the aim of the Commission is to make the Building Stock Observatory a central repository for EU buildings data, addressing not only, but at first the needs of policymakers. There is already a wealth of buildings data. It can be static data, typically energy performance certification databases, or more dynamic data, such as data from smart meters or building automation and control systems. And so we need to make the most out of what's available. There is also a win-win relationship between data and policy making, meaning that better data leads to a more accurate monitoring of the impacts, so it can improve how policy is monitored and made. And on the other side, policies are key drivers to generate more data from buildings on the ground. I can mention, for instance, the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, in which we have some provisions really dedicated to modernization of buildings, and also, for instance, the EU Action Plan on digitalizing the energy systems. Voilà, these are two examples. Next slide. So I wish to stress also that the Building Stock Observatory benefits from a rich landscape of past and ongoing projects funded under H2020, Horizon Europe, Life Clean Energy Transition. These projects address the core levers for gradually increasing the amount of buildings data, making the data more reliable, interoperable, and also for delivering the necessary solutions to collect, process, and analyze data for policy purposes. One aim is to help implement the EU policies, in particular those provisions that are related to buildings data, for instance, under the EPBD, One second aim is to collect and process data which is readily available. A good example is the H2020 Build Hub project, which develops a data collection approach and a web-based data hub platform. This project has strong links with the BSO. And also, one important goal is to deliver the technologies to improve the building's data infrastructure. And here we can refer to innovation actions funded at the Horizon Europe, which prepare the ground of a big data value chain in building stocks. Next slide. So I just wish to mention the Life Clean Energy Transition Program, just because the development of the BSO is based on a cross-service cooperation in the Commission involving CINEA, DGNR, DG but also on a dedicated service contract that Andreas and Roberto are representing here, that is actually funded under the Life Clean Energy Transition Program. So just to mention that, voilà, the key objective of Life Clean Energy Transition is to create the market and regulatory enabling conditions for the clean energy transition. And typically the programs focus on enabling actions for energy efficiency and renewable energy policies. It's a continuation of previous programs such as Intelligent Energy Europe and H2020 Energy Efficiency. And it's €1 billion over 7 years from 2021. Voilà, it was just to make this reference. Next slide. And now I'm going to focus on the BSO. Next slide. So as mentioned earlier, the aim of the BSO is to be a central repository for EU buildings data along some main areas which have been defined as critical by our colleagues in DGNR. First of all, the characteristics of the building stock, for instance, the number of buildings, surface areas of buildings. Also indicators pertaining to construction and renovation activities, in particular, of course, following the activities in the area of renovation is key. Then a focus on also, and quite obvious, I would say, on energy and greenhouse gas emission indicators. And finally, socioeconomic indicators, for example, to be able to follow the investments made in sustainable energy renovation, or to follow the situation in the EU on energy poverty in buildings. Next slide. So the first version that we have online, it was put online on the just before the summer, is just the beginning. This is what I want to stress. It includes indicators on the building stock, on energy consumption, on renovation rates. Of course, the highest priority domain is the building stock. For instance, the BSO includes indicators about number of buildings in countries along different categories, residential, non-residential, and subcategories. The time-related coverage for the human being is a bit limited. I mean, it focuses mainly on the years preceding 2020, but all this is ongoing work, and it's going to improve very soon, and then over the next month and years. Next slide. The tool includes currently, I mean, the version 1, which is online, includes 3 perspectives: a database, a data mapper, and fact sheets. So this is in line with the structure of the previous BSO. The database is the main component. It allows to select and display the evolution over time of indicators for the member states and the EU. It also allows to download data and to consult the sources that were used to feed the indicators. Then the data mapper allows to visualize the variation of indicators on a map of the European Union. This is basically based on the same data, but it's a different representation. And finally, the fact sheets, they offer a synthesis of most relevant data for each member state and the EU. And again, this is based on the same data set. It's just a different way of presenting the information. Next slide. So here is a screen capture of how the database perspective looks like now in version 1. So basically, there are menus to select the domain from which the indicators you want to visualize are, the categories, the subcategories, the years over which you want to display those indicators, countries, and you can select, of course, the indicators that you want to display. And then there is a small map on the bottom left, which shows the variation for the higher level indicators. So, well, this is quite a simple representation, and it's quite user friendly. And so don't hesitate to go and test it, because well, it's online on DGNR website, and we are very happy to get any feedback from early users. Next slide, please. I wish to stress that, again, that this is ongoing work. So the current version can be considered as basically an alpha version, right? We're currently working already on the development of a second version, which will feature a new user interface and will include more indicators and data. And it should be ready online early 2024, so Q1 2024. Following the release of that new version, there will be regular updates, especially to enrich the BSO dataset. But I guess Andreas and Roberto can definitely give you a lot of information about the future of the BSO. And just to conclude, to encourage you to subscribe to the BSO newsletter, because given that we've put online this version, given the foreseen evolutions, I guess the newsletter is going to be more active than it was previously. Voilà, that would be all for me. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Very good. Thank you very much, Sylvain. And now I'm exactly continuing with what you said. So I will tell, first of all, a bit what is new to really future-proof the BSO, because we will hopefully have it in place for quite a long time. And so it means that in the version 2 and also in the previous works that we have supported in version 1, this is really about making it future-proof. And then I will also refer to what's coming next. So first of all, we have changed the philosophy of the BSO a little bit. First of all, what is very important for us, that it's really a tool, specifically in the long run, in the mid-run, made by users for users. So everybody who is here on the webinar is a potential user, of course, of the BSO. And you can see that other users are obviously also the EU member states, because there is also, thanks to the revision of the EPBD, a direct link, a direct ask to member states that in a few years' time, they will report their building stock data into the BSO. So that means that will be a completely next level again for the BSO. And at this time already, we are, of course, also in touch with other stakeholders, like with this webinar, to raise your interest, awareness, and also to make you contribute. And what we've done, because we say it's by users for users, as Sylvain explained, we have updated the user interface based on significant feedback that we evaluated and tried to implement as good as possible, based also on the version 1 that Sylvain just explained. And of course, we have made a massive effort on updating the data. So the existing ones, the indicators, and also future indicators that we would like to include. So the central role of this team is that we facilitate these interactions and improvements, both with member states, with our clients, HINEA and the Commission, and of course also all other stakeholders. What is also very important in the philosophy is that we do not want to show any more empty bottles. So some users of you who have used early versions, so not the version 1 Sylvain was talking about, but a version previous to that, you may remember that sometimes there were indicators that looked very promising, but when you clicked on them, they were rather empty because of unavailability of data. And so we have switched this approach that we say, okay, we are only going to show indicators where a sufficient amount of data is actually available. So we really move from finding a lot of empty bottles to only finding at least to a decent degree filled bottles, as you can see on the right side. We also have a new team working on the BSO. First of all, you see here, it's Guidehouse, the company where I'm working. I'm the project manager of this project. And apart from the project management, we have also supported the Commission in further development, in further developing the user interface. and also updating the data structure lying behind. Then we have BPIE. They have developed a new indicator logic, which I will also explain a bit more, and they are organizing the stakeholder engagement. We have EURAC Research. Roberto is also in this talk today, who are leading the data collection work package and also the data evaluation, because it's also very much about data quality, as you can imagine, as a representative of a member state, but also as a very important link to the concerted action EPBD, which is an informal exchange of member states on how they implement the EPBD nationally. The Danish Energy Agency, in their function as the coordinator, is dealing with involving the member states already now in a very early stage of this third round of the BSO, as you can say. And last but not least, we also have Technical University of Vienna, who is also dealing with quality review of data and who are very much specialized in model data. That's the team. And the team has also developed a new logic for the indicators. What is very important for us that we do not just collect anything and put it in the database so that you would see it. We have very clear principles for which indicators we select. So first of all, it's obviously very important that indicators that we would like to have and that we feature on the BSO are collectible. So that was one of the previous items I already mentioned, that we do not want to have empty bottles anymore. It's also very important that data are relevant. What does that mean? So in terms of what Sylvain just explained, like floor areas and other data, which really inform policy making on the improvement of the energy efficiency of buildings and their decarbonization. So in this respect, they really need to be relevant. So it's not the idea to just feature everything. And then, of course, the data also need to be consistent. So ideally, they have, because you've heard, of course, the idea is that we show data for all the member states. Ideally, they have a similar meaning in all the member states. They have been collected for several years, and they are also continuously collected, ideally, and not just one-off data sets which have been collected once or twice and then never continue. But the idea is that the BSO is really serving the monitoring of the progress of the decarbonization of the building stock, and that means that we obviously want to have the same indicator available for several years in a row for the past and also running into the future. Then we have collection priorities. So based on these principles that I just mentioned, we have developed a set of data where we say, okay, these are must-have indicators. You will see of some of them later on. We have optional indicators which we call nice to have. They can be collected, but they also may have some data gaps. And then the question arises already, is the bottle still full enough to show them or not? And then we have data which are rejected, or indicators which are rejected at this point, but which doesn't mean that this needs to be the case eternally, but indicators can also move up the ladder in this sequence. For example, if very good data on renovation rates will be available, then we will add them. So we have them already in, but currently just for 1 year. That you will see that when you browse the version. But indicators which are rejected for one or the other reason, they can move up the ladder because, for example, the availability improves. What is also very important, that's a bit behind the scenes, but also to give you just a light impression of all the thinking that is behind when you also set up a database that needs to be future-proof and be prepared for all kinds of combinations of data. On the left, you see the full population, just not in the sense of we are talking about people, but a statistical population. In this case, imagine we are talking about the total floor area of residential buildings, for example. That would be the total population. And then you can split this population up by different criteria, which we call granularities. For example, you could split up the full population into fuel types. That would be the green version, the vertically separated group. And to make it explicitly different, we have a horizontal division for the second granularity, which, for example, could be the building type, like single-family homes, multifamily homes. And for many of these data, you can imagine that you have either granularity 1 or granularity 2. But it also might be that you have both available and you can combine them, which then means you cannot just split up the whole population, in this case, in 3 or 2 groups, subgroups. But when combining them, it will already be 6 subgroups. And this is something the logic behind what we do needs to be prepared. Sylvain also mentioned that we will have a new look and feel, so a new user interface. We listened to the user feedback that we intensively collected and evaluated. And one of the outcomes of this discussion is that in the next version, in the version 2, as we call it internally, the database and the data mapper will grow together. We will kind of integrate them, merge them, so that compared to today, you will have a single entry point also on the website, both for the database and the data mapper. So you have the functionality combined, and we will have an improved version of the fact sheets. We will also offer other functionalities on top of what you can do in the current version 1, like the flexibility to adjust graphs and also the selection of different chart types. Of course, what is most interesting to most of the users is the data itself that the BSO contains. At the top, you can see an overview of the current indicators, and you have seen this in even more or in a higher resolution already in Sylvain's presentation. And at the bottom, you can see the tentative list of additional indicators that we would like to add. This is still a little bit subject to final quality checks that we are currently performing with the data, what will eventually make it in the next version of the BSO. But you can see that we intend to include indicators like the total floor area of building permits, electricity and gas prices, which is of course also very much in the discussion and determines very much the cost effectiveness of renovations, for example, and also zero emission buildings levels. We will include construction producer price cost index, then also a number of societal or social indicators which go into the direction of energy poverty, like the areas on utility bills or the inability to keep the house warm, or buildings who have structural issues like mold growth. What is the share of those buildings? Thanks to a new collaboration, which I will refer to in one of the next slides, we can also feature greenhouse gas emissions from the energy use in buildings, final energy consumption by sector and by use in quite a nice resolution. In order to make it really comparable, we will also include heating and cooling degree days, because they, again, are the precondition to feature climate-corrected space heating in households, which will also be one of the indicators that we intend to include in the upcoming version. So where do we get these data from? I said it's a tool for users, but also made by the users. So we have established already in the first months of our work on this project since the beginning of this year, very nice relations to Eurostat, to the EEA, the European Environment Agency, and also to JRC, who are very collaborative. So it's really a joy working with the colleagues there and aligning on the availability of data sets. And as you can see, some of the data sets that we provided are from these sources, and a very important aspect, for example, with a view to data from Eurostat, is that they are not a let's say, biased sample of information that you get, but it's really statistically valid and representing the overall population of what you can get from Eurostat. And the same goes for the European Environment Agency, who in the end also builds their assessments on data available from Eurostat. So then you can already see that we are also interested to collaborate with you. So if you would like to be one of the also data providers and not just of the data users of the BSO, then feel free to get in touch with us. And that leads me to the last point, what is coming up? As I already said, but I'm keeping up repeating it, of course, so you are really aware of this, that we really mean to this to be a collaborative effort in the end. We really want everybody who has reliable, good data to get in touch with us and get involved as a trusted and valued BSO data provider. And if you imagine that this is something for you to become a trusted data provider of the BSO, please contact us and we can have a closed door discussion on the future development of the BSO and your potential contribution to that. So you are really cordially invited to do so. Yeah, then Sylvain, that's the last slide I have, mentioned the launch of the new version. So in rocket science terms, the launch window is Q1 2024. So we do not know yet the exact launch date, but we will keep you informed. So my ask to you is please stay tuned so you will not miss day one of version 2 of the EU Building Stock Observatory. So thank you very much for your attendance. And now I'm looking forward to the questions.